mission to get Nickelodeon magazine. It's packed with celebrity interviews and comics and puzzles and great stuff to collect. But only a real live grown-up can call to order it for you. Of course, you can think of a nice, polite way to ask.
Nickelodeon magazine, please.
Nickelodeon has been around for quite a long time, and throughout all of the years of its existence, we've seen the network go through so many different eras. From the launch of Nicktoons to the premiere of SpongeBob SquarePants.
SpongeBob SquarePants coming Saturday morning in 2 weeks! Be there and be square!
Decades of the many sitcoms Nick had to offer. While the content of the channel is constantly changing, for the most part, there's one thing that stayed a constant for the better part of Nick's years. And that's Nickelodeon magazine.
Nick Magazine's got that, huh? Well, what does Nick Magazine have inside? Listen up and follow me until you're satisfied.
I remember seeing ads for Nick Magazine as a kid in the early 2000s, and despite really wanting them, I was never able to get them. Nickelodeon ran so many ads, created jingles, and stressed to the viewers that this magazine was quote-unquote good for your brain.
Parents want you to have fun. They know Nick Magazine is good for a healthy brain.
All while giving the children very specific rules on how to ask their parents to purchase it for them.
Thank your parents by washing your dog, painting your room, or washing your room and painting your dog. Nick Magazine, it's just for you.
I wonder how many kids got whooped or punished because Nickelodeon told them to harass their parents. But you know what's really interesting though? I expected Nick Magazine to be discontinued in the early 2000s. So imagine my surprise when I see that these magazines were getting published until 2009, but technically until 2016, but we'll get to that part later. Either way, it made me curious and want to know more about the history of this decently obscure magazine. But before that, I want to say, yes, I am entirely aware of what's going on with Nickelodeon right now with the quiet on set allegations, and as someone who has been on a Nickelodeon set, I have stories myself to tell, and I'm not even sure that I should tell those stories. If I do make a video on the whole Dan Schneider, Brian Peck situation, then I will not be monetizing it. Nickelodeon magazine would kickstart their journey in fall of 1990. At that time, Nickelodeon had been on the air for a while, but didn't really have much of an identity. The programming on the channel was just content that Nick had brought from other companies, while they focused on finding their own place in the entertainment industry. At the time, Nick consisted of shows like Pinwheel, Nickelflix, and America Goes Bananas. But
Welcome to America Goes Bananas.
By 1990, they were slowly transitioning out of that stage, but still didn't really have much else to offer. Which is why when we get the first issue of Nick Magazine, its cover would be Chevy Chase being slimed with little else to show. Give or take a month or two later, we would get issue number 2 of Nick Magazine, this time sporting Kid and Play on the cover, which you can't really get more 90s than Kid and Play. But if you look really close at the corner of the first issue, you'll see the Pizza Hut logo. That's because these first 2 issues were given out for free at all Pizza Hut locations, and they were $1.95 anywhere else. After these first 2 issues, Nick wouldn't publish any more magazines for a while, almost as if they were testing the waters to see how popular the magazines could be. Remember, this was before Nick had any real identity, so consider those first 2 issues the network taking baby steps. Because by the mid-90s, Nick not only had a catalog behind them, but they had started a whole new era. Nick didn't just make cartoons, they made Nicktoons.
Not just cartoons.
We're Nicktoons.
Arnold, Helga, Phoebe, Gerald, Sid, Grandpa Stinky Harold, SpongeBob, Patrick, Sandy, Keep the Krabby Patties handy, Squidward, Tito Twister, Reggie Rocket, Otto's sister, Ginger Hoodsy, Carl Macy, Junior High School Life is Crazy.
Not just cartoons.
We're Nicktoons.
Not just cartoons.
We're Nicktoons.
Not just cartoons.
We're Nicktoons.
Not just cartoons.
We're Nicktoons. It's time to put hard times behind, get all the bad things off your mind.
And what better way to promote those shows than by putting them on the cover of your own magazines? So in 1993, they relaunched Nickelodeon magazine, and you guessed it, Ren and Stimpy were plastered on the first cover. This would start to become a trend. I mean, clearly you can't have Nick magazine without Nick characters. But they didn't just only have Nick stuff. They'd also used the magazine to interview popular sports stars or promote upcoming movies like Batman Forever. And if we leap forward a few years, we'd even get a cover featuring the very adult animated series Futurama. Along with that and a couple celebrity interviews every once in a while, it will look like the Nick magazine was receiving a lot of success. But the more the popularity of Nicktoons would grow, the less you'd see a celebrity on the cover. We were slowly starting to move away from magazines that would catch your parents' eye to magazines that would immediately be recognized to the kids they were marketing to. And for good reason. Comparing their old issues to the ones that were new at the time, I'd never pick up the old one. But as the decade would start to come to an end, so would this era of Nickelodeon. Things that were popular then were slightly but surely changing. Rugrats were the face of the network in the late 90s.
You know what, Angelica? Rugrats gotta be my favorite show.
Well, Rosie, if you love me on TV, you're really gonna love me in the Rugrats movie.
But they were slowly having their spotlight stolen from a new cartoon in SpongeBob SquarePants. That and kids started caring a lot less about esteemed and established actors and athletes and started to care more about pop stars and heartthrobs.
There's no need to argue, parents just don't understand. Nah, come on. They don't understand. They don't understand. They gonna get it. No, if you feel me, okay. Feel me.
So, to kick off the beginning of the millennium, the very first issue they published was an interview with Britney Spears. And that would set the tone, so from then on we'd get Nickelodeon movie promotions or interviews with big stars like Frankie Muniz, with a few sports interviews placed here and there, but not nearly as frequent as they was before. In April of 2000, they'd advertised their first ever special cartoon issue. And I don't know what that means. They've made issues with cartoons on the covers before, so maybe this one was special because The Simpsons were on it? Unfortunately, I don't own it, so I guess I'll be left in the dark for a little while longer. But these magazines would be a good way of getting kids familiar to new characters before they premiere on the network. Some of the magazines even included posters, so Nick could breach the confines of your sacred home. But for the most part, the magazines were becoming what you'd expect from them. Nickelodeon characters on the covers, pop stars like Jonas Brothers and Justin Timberlake, movie promotions like Shrek and Spider-Man, all while Nick was simultaneously running its Nick Jr. magazine.
Nick Jr. magazine has all kinds of great things parents can do with their kids.
We made a snake from aluminum for you.
We made these binoculars from toilet paper rolls.
With Nick Jr. magazine, kids play to learn.
And parents learn to play.
But concern was slowly starting to peek its head into Nickelodeon Studios. By now it was 2009, and kids' interest along with the rest of the world's needs for magazines were beginning to fade. A concept like Nick Magazine was perfect for the time. In the year 1990, kids could really only get their entertainment news from television. The internet existed, but almost no one actually owned a computer, especially kids. Even later in the 90s and the early 2000s, when internet cafes and libraries with computer labs became a thing, the magazine still had a place because this was information delivered right to you. You didn't have to leave your driveway. All you had to do was check your mail and you'd have the latest pop culture news. But then YouTube pops up in 2005 and absolutely derails everything. Who wants to read what curated celebrity news was going on? I mean, what kid wants to read in general? YouTube made leaving the house to go to the library actually seem appealing. Not only could you watch celebrity interviews and get the jump on pop star drama, but you could now listen to other people's opinions on it. So Nick's magazine, along with almost every children's magazine till this day, just became something that people buy exclusively for posters. And once Paraphones were released in 2007, they completely changed the game, and now everyone's access to celebrity news was in the palm of their hands. So as a result, in December of 2009, Nick Magazine would release their final issue, titled Nick Magazine's Comics, Puzzles, and Pranks for the Memories. Its run of magazines with fun interviews and posters and questionable educational value ran for nearly 19 years and had now come to an end. Nick Magazine had officially ended, and its absence would leave fans stranded for 5 years. Because in 2015, Nick would announce that they are bringing back Nick Magazine, and they released their first issue come July, with a new logo and representing a completely different era of Nick. Their first cover would feature Sanjay and Craig, 2 years after the show premiered, and just a year before it was cancelled. The next few issues would bounce back and forth from Sanjay and Craig to Breadwinners to Pig, Banana, Goat, Cricket, and whoever. And it was clear the old era of magazine news was out. There were no pop stars or movie news on the covers. Just the same few Nick shows that they were trying to promote at the time, with some quote-unquote fun activity said to be hiding within the pages. But these magazines didn't feel like, magazines. The whole point of magazines, to me at least, is to get caught up to date on the latest in pop culture. The era of Nick I'd grown up with, and many of my viewers had grown up with, was gone. The era of magazines is gone. Some of the staples of pop culture had now been irrelevant to today's generation. This new era of magazines were more like pamphlets for current or upcoming Nickelodeon shows, which is not a bad thing, but the unfortunate side effect of that is they no longer held any pop culture significance. But that's just the story of a person who grew up in a different era. In the same way that the era before mine probably sees our generation's era of Nick as completely inferior. But that's not the case. Just because one group grew up with one thing doesn't make another inferior. These magazines were a product of their times. Times in plural, because no matter what generation of Nick you grew up in, all of ours are valid because all of our memories we have go right back to Nick. So whether you were a 90s baby who bought these magazines as a way to escape the mundane moments in life, or if you were a 2000s child who bought these magazines for celebrity news and cool posters, or even if you were a 2010 kid who just read these magazines for fun, you're all valid and your memories with them are valid as well. But I am curious, to any 2015 Nick magazine fans, what made you purchase them? Was it the commercials that I must have missed? Did you come across them at school? Or was it possibly a parent who grew up with Nick magazine in the 90s and wanted to share that love for their magazines with you? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. And thanks for watching.